welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us author Terrence Rotering. He is a former retired from United States Air Force after 20 years of service as a weapons system officer on fighter worldwide, and then 15 more years with NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command. As an author, he's the author of the 10 book Chronicles series, and he gives readers an epic adventure of fantasy, science fiction, and spiritual warfare, following in the footsteps of the giants in all three genres. So uh, we'll learn from him about the good wings that guided his writing, the unique egg within an egg narrative structure, and how his work empowers readers to see they are already equipped for their own battles. Welcome to the show, Terrence.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show, Terrence. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the world will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll learn about epic storytelling from you. We'll talk about all this, but before that, let's talk a bit more about your journey, your background, your story, so that people know who they are listening to.
Okay, once again, Terrence Rotering. Like AJ said, I did 20 years in the Air Force flying F-15s and F-111s up here. You see the models all over the world. And I did that for 20 years and then went to NORAD Northcom for another 15 to 19 years, depending on how you count it. And my journey, I started these books, the first trilogy, just because I wanted to show my boys that you could write a book, that anybody can do a book and talk to the world. And then after that, I said, 5 years later, I was like, I need to do the prequel to this. And so I started that. And in 2024, I finished that. And I decided, because of these God winks that I think we'll get into, the story's not finished. I felt like a reporter that I was just discovering the story, not writing it. And so I did another 3, which just really expanded the fantasy into sci-fi and exploded it to 7 dimensions, which just made it, kind of the unified theory of everything. And then I have another trilogy coming out here in the spring, AJ, that will it's kind of like you mentioned, the egg within the egg. So the first trilogy was a little egg and then another egg around it with the prequel, and then exploded it to a massive egg. And then you need the 4th volume here to really just solidify the whole thing and tighten it down. So it's an incredible, massive story. And I look forward to talking a little bit more about it. But yeah, so fantasy, sci-fi, and spiritual warfare all wrapped together, all the genres, and they do kind of compete with all the genres that are out there, all the greats that are out there. So,
absolutely, Terence. So let's understand. You make it sound so easy, but none of this is easy. Neither the times that you worked in the U.S. Air Force, and then even as a writer. So let's understand it a bit, from that point, from a common person's perspective. Is that what inspired you to become an author? Means you were so busy in your, work life, you could have just relaxed after that. Why to get into a line which was totally new? Means from weapons to, pen as a sword, if you can put it that way. Help us understand that part for the audience, Terence.
Sure. So in 2005, when I wrote that first one for my children, it was a little one. And then 2010, I did that prequel, which was much bigger. And I kind of said, someday after I retire, I have to have something to do and I can't move around anymore. So maybe I'll just start this writing and see how it goes. So then that took another 15 years after I had a little bout with cancer. I got out of the Air Force and I said, the story isn't finished. I needed to finish the trilogy. So I finished the 3rd one, the Forever. So The Faithful Stand Forever was the first trilogy. And that was finished then in 2024. And then, I needed to finish. Before the story, The Faithful Stand Forever, there was a whole backstory to that, a whole history. So I did the prequel to that and really was excited about that. And when I finished that, my granddaughter was born about a year ago, and I said, I need, someday she's going to read these, and I need to put her in this story. And that kind of was the inspiration for doing that third trilogy that just exploded the story. And then just a couple months ago, I realized it's not finished yet. So you say, yeah, it's not easy, but in a way it was kind of easy for me because it followed my journey along the way. The first trilogy is about family, and that's where I was back when I was flying. Didn't have a lot of time, but the focus was on the family. And then the second one expanded it to the world of Trinian, just because, I was flying and in my mind, doing my best to protect our country and protect the world from, for freedom. And then once again, it expanded because I retired and I didn't have anything to do. And I was really into mission back when I was flying. So I said, well, what's my mission? And so I wanted to expand this story to reach all of the people that are out there that are reading it. And my mission is to show them something different. So in fantasy and fiction right now, there's a lot of negative, a lot of despair, a lot of hopelessness. And this story really spreads hope. It tells everybody you are important, you are unique. There is purpose and design in the universe, and there is someone out there to help you, and there are answers to the questions. So instead of leaving it where the Martins and Jordans and a lot of those really big fiction writers leave it, I say there are answers, and get rid of that hopelessness. There's a lot of hope. So that really is the mission, AJ, is just to spread hope now and positive instead of the negative and nihilism that's out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hope is what the world needs at all points in time, especially at this point in time, especially in the times of artificial intelligence. So tell us, to understand your book series, Chronicles series, 10-book series. How would you like a common person who is mostly used to one book at a time to understand this 10-book Chronicles series?
So the good thing, AJ, is, you could read one of the books and it's kind of standalone. You could enjoy it. So the first trilogy, if you're really into fantasy, and then, faith, family, hope, and a lot of adventure, you could read just that one book. And then if you wanted to really continue it, that trilogy is a standalone trilogy. So you have an egg that by itself is just fine. You can eat that egg. But then when you say, I'm hungering for more, I want to see what happened before that. Then you could go into that second egg, and there's that whole prequel. And that's where you really start getting into a little bit of sci-fi with the fantasy. And you mentioned AI. It starts bringing in artificial intelligence too as the protagonist or the antagonist. And then, so you could enjoy that and be happy with that. And then years later, if you wanted to, you could go, you know what? There's a lot more to that story. And there was, because those first two eggs were just one dimension, if you will. That third trilogy, the Chronicles of the Seven Wheels, expands it and explodes it into 7 different dimensions. So now all of a sudden, instead of just one area, you have 7 areas, and they're all intertwined. There's people going back and forth between them in time tunnels. It really blows up the sci-fi you can imagine, with black holes and tesseracts and photon entanglement and all kinds of really crazy things if you're really into sci-fi. So that's your big sci-fi trilogy. And then when you finally want to get the whole universe, that whole unified theory of everything all together, that's when you get this last one that I'm putting out in the spring. So you can enjoy just one book, you can enjoy one trilogy, or you can enjoy just the whole massive thing, or you can wait for it to come out in Netflix or Prime Video, or hopefully that'll happen, or Angel Studios or something. Someone will pick it up, and then you really go, wow, this is an awesome.
Absolutely, Terrence. We'll come to the egg within an egg structure and also about the God wings. But first, to understand, who are your books for? Is it for only one particular type of audience, age group? I want to understand a bit more from that point of view.
So as the series grew, it grew more for teenagers to adults. So there's a lot of big concepts when you get into the sci-fi that really appeal to adults and a college level. But you could probably start at about 14 years old. I would say the younger than 14, I would want the parents to read it first, because there's no sex stuff in there. There's no bad language in there, but evil does some bad stuff. So, there's some things in there, nothing really gross or anything in there, but the concepts are kind of kind of scary. So who is it for? It's for everybody over about 14 years. Or if you were going to read it to your children, there's a couple little parts you could leave out if you were reading to them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, to understand, from your journey point of view, your Air Force career, how much did that influence your epic narratives?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of, because you can go from, fantasy sword fighting all the way to, there's battles in there that are spaceships. There's battles in there where there are pilots flying fighters. I incorporated a lot of that into the stories. And another thing that really affected, or that the Air Force really affected the storytelling, was in just the organizational aspect of it, because it's very complicated as far as, it's not simple. It's very complicated as far as the concepts and as far as everybody interrelating and the people moving around in the time tunnels between books and between times and between dimensions. So that organization in the Air Force and at the Air Force Academy, I think, is what really helped me with the stories. But yes, there's a lot of flying in there and a lot of battle sequences that my Air Force career did influence.
Absolutely, absolutely, Terrence. You mentioned about, that you wrote because of this. But was that the only inspiration, motivation? I want to understand, Miss, where did you get this continuous motivation to write? You can put it that, okay, I was retiring. I was thinking, well, I'll not be able to. That is okay. That cannot be the full reason. How do you continue to keep yourself, motivated for writing? Everybody will then write. Not everyone can be an author like you. And to write this sort of a stuff when you are, you're talking about the greats, Tolkien and others. So I want to understand from that point of epic storytelling, what was your motivation? What was your inspiration? Where did you get all these things? And then we'll come to the God wings. It will only come to those who will actually have that motivation and inspiration.
Well, I would say anybody actually can write, and it's making it, technology is making it a lot easier now. As long as you have something to say, you start with something to say, and then you just start writing. And the thing that always scares people about writing is having a blank page of paper. Well, I just develop a couple characters and I let them start talking. And when the characters start talking, they kind of go the direction that they want to go. That's something that we all, like we're doing right now, we love to talk. And when we talk, we come up with ideas. And so you let the characters come up with the ideas for you. So you start with a purpose. And my purpose was at first, like I talked about, just showing my boys they could write. And then, because of the God winks that we're going to get into, the inspiration kind of came to, make this different, make it different than what's out there in the world right now, make it positive. And that's the biggest thing for the books, AJ, is I just want people after they read them to know, that there is hope, and that they're not alone, and there are answers to the questions, and to search for them, and to be positive. So the books are very positive in the middle of all that action. And I'm ready to get into the God winks if you are, because I think that's a big part of the answer to your question about what kept me going.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's understand that.
Okay, so at the end of that first trilogy, when I was coming up with one of the land masses for forever, the faithful stand forever. So it was the third book in the first trilogy. I was looking for, and the hair all on the back of my neck always stands up when I tell the story, AJ. But I was looking for one landmass where I needed the very beginning of the story to start, where, and this is part of that part where over 14, people were sacrificing their children over a fire to a demon called Moloch. And I was like, well, I don't know what to name this island. So I said, I'll take the first letter of all of the land masses that I had put into my books in 2005 and 2010 and see if it spelled something. And so I did that, and it came up TOPHET for all of those land masses. And I was like, well, that's got a ring to it, Tophet. Okay, cool. So then a couple days later, I said, I wonder if that's a real place. And I went and I looked and I Googled it, and it said, this is a place in ancient Israel in the Valley of Hinnom where people were sacrificing their children to a demon called Moloch. And I was like, I could not have planned that, because it was 10 years and 15 years earlier where I did the first two books. And I randomly came up with these names for these places, Trinian and Omentia, Parlantis, Heath, just pulling them out of my ear. And then 15 years later, I put just those letters together, and it comes up with a name that is actually what I was writing in the story. So it's beyond belief to me how that happened. So I said, well, something's going on here. I'm not trying to say, the books are inspired or whatever, but I think someone was inspiring me to write these books, maybe to spread hope in the world. And then it continued on in the second series really quickly. Every morning on Facebook, I put, I wake up early. So today wasn't a big deal. It's 5 a.m. here, but I wake up at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I look at my clock, and 3:16 kept coming up. So I put John in front of it, took a picture, and put it on my Facebook for years. John 3:16, because that's in the Bible, the gospel, where God loves us and he sent Jesus to save us. And so I was doing that, and then all of a sudden a bunch of 3:16s came up when I went to publish my book. I think it was Stand. I had a little piece of gold, and I asked, how much are you going to give me for it? And the place I was selling it to said, well, it changes constantly, but right now it's $2,316. I was like, 316. And then the first person that did a review on my book, it was her number 316th review. And I was like, what's going on here? And then I get the book back, and the publisher, they do a bunch of changes on it, and they put it out, and it's got 316 pages. And there was just a ton of those things that happened, AJ, along with the naming of the Ketuvim and the Chronicles of the Seven Wheels. I don't know if we have time to go into that, but there's a bunch of amazing coincidences, if you will. And I want to tell the audience that there are no coincidences. Everything that's happening in the world around us is happening for a reason. And that's another one of the things in the book, is just to push people to look and pay attention to what's happening in the world around them. There's a bunch of amazing things, and we just need to open our eyes to them. So, those were a few of the things that hit me, that inspired me to keep going and to just go, there's more to this story. And like I said, I'm a reporter. I'm just it has come very easy to me. I take a walk with the dogs, and I come back, and I just be amazed at the things that would hit me to include in the story and to expand it. So I hope that touches a little bit about, on the inspiration for the books.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What about the egg within an egg structure? How did you come with that? Means that needs a lot of, experience and expertise, and help us understand that part.
Sure. So I think that came a little bit naturally, just because of, when you start with a little story like that first trilogy, and people are reading that, and it's like, oh, that's kind of nice. It's kind of like Little House on the Prairie meets fantasy meets swords. And then I realized that there was a bunch of elements that I just dropped in there in that first trilogy that, needed to be explained. And so I said, well, I got to explain that. So that's how that second egg happened, where it expanded it to explaining a lot of the fantasy artifacts and the different things that were going on. And then, I introduced a bunch more mysteries in that second trilogy, and they needed to be explained. So that expanded it into the third one, where it really went into the sci-fi. And once again, there's so many neat things in this story, AJ. There's so many aspects. There's a ton of hidden gems, if you will, jewels. And the more you spend reading it and the more you look at it, the more you'll see how things interconnect and just the amazing things that happen. So, and then, realizing that once again, it wasn't finished, I had to wrap it all up and solve basically everything within the story. So I don't leave things hanging like, hey, where did that come from? Or where did that spaceship come from? Or who's this little girl? There's so many things to mysteries to explore and to solve within the story. And so that's where the different eggs came from.
Absolutely. You talk about, Tolkien and others, and you also talk about your characters.
Yes.
And I want to understand your characters. How are they different? You talk about Frodo, you talk about Harry, you talk about the van, you talk about the ring, and you talk about the stones. But how do your characters differ from those great cis characters?
Sure. So a lot of the characters in a lot of those stories, the Tolkien and the Martins and the Jordans, they struggle a lot with moral clarity and my characters are primarily struggling with faith and how they're going to get through the different struggles. So they're very similar in a lot of ways, but they're also different in that they have a hope to hang on to. And there's evil characters, of course, in the story too. So there you have the whole mix, just like everywhere else. But I like to say, where Martin has his wheel of time that's turning and it just keeps going, and Jordan, he has, what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought there. But Frodo in Tolkien's Frodo, in the Lord of the Rings, he has the ring, right? And in Rawlings, stories with Harry Potter, he has the wand. And in my stories, in that fourth volume that's coming out in the spring, you'll find out that you all have the wheels. So I don't know, when you see an action flick or something, or even a fantasy movie, you come out of there and you feel like you've been in the movie. So a lot of times I'll drive my car really fast thinking I'm in a fighter jet or something after I watch a Tom Cruise movie or whatever. In these books, after you're done reading them, you'll find out that you have the tools, you have the stones, if you will. And I don't want to give way too much, but the stones are really critical in this story. And so, unlike these other shows where you get out of there and you go, oh, Frodo had that ring and, Harry Potter had that wand and I don't have any of those. You have the stones. So I condensed this final volume down right back to earth and right back to the reader. And so the reader realizes, hey, this battle's going on around me. And this whole thing that I've just read, I'm part of it and I have the tools to fight within it. So I know I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there in the very beginning, but I think that's what I wanted to say. And so you have the tools and there is hope, and you have everything you need to accomplish the battles that you face every day and the struggles that you face every day. So.
Absolutely, Terrence. So when you talk about spiritual warfare, help us understand what is this spiritual warfare?
Okay, so once again, the different genres that are in here, spiritual warfare is added in. So you have angels and you have demons, and you really have the protagonist and the antagonist here, the kings on the chessboard behind the battle. So throughout this thing, you have all the fantasy aspects that you have in fantasy stories and in movies, and the same thing with sci-fi. But the spiritual aspect is kind of what drives the protagonists in the characters, to get through the struggles that they have and get to the end. So their faith is very important. So that's why I say it's about faith, family, love, and adventure. So that's what gives really the design and the purpose and the help that you have and the hope and all the answers in the story is the God aspect to it and the spiritual aspect to it. So I don't want to shy away from that. That's why I wrote this book. I think that's the source of where we can get positive in our storytelling nowadays, and where we can provide that hope and purpose to people is through faith and through our belief in God. So that's where the characters come from, at least on one side, on the white side of the chessboard, and then on the black side of the chessboard. And I don't mean that racially, of course. There's a black and white characters, on a chessboard. All the different pieces on the chessboard represent all the different levels of protagonists and antagonists that are in the stories. But angels and demons really drive and help their sides in the story, and that spiritual aspect is very important to this trilogy, or this trilogy of trilogies, I like to say.
Absolutely, Terrence. So in a nutshell, what do you want your readers to take away from your book? What is it that you learn from your own books? What is it that you expected from your books, and have you achieved those?
Okay, so we touched on it a little bit, but again, I want people to really enjoy the fiction and the fantasy that's in the books, and there's tons of it. There's tons of science fiction, I should say, and fantasy. But at the same time, I want people to walk away knowing that they are not alone. They are very unique. There is design to the universe. There's purpose for what they're doing. Love is very important, and there are answers to the questions. So if you're tired of the nihilism and the negativity of a lot of the sci-fi that's out of there, or you can't watch it with your kids, or you can't give them a book to read because it's just too negative and there's just too much bad stuff in there, dive into the Chronicles series and enjoy one trilogy or all of them, all of the eggs. And I think you'll really come away with a lot of hope, and you'll give your kids hope, and they'll know that they're important, and they'll know that there are answers, and it'll provide some of the answers if they're. And one thing I also wanted to say, AJ, at the back of the books, a lot of my experiences that you've talked about in the Air Force and stuff, I put a lot of those in there because they're blog entries from my Chronicles of Trinian.com website that I had for over the years. So a lot of the neat flying experiences or different near-death experiences that I have, I talk about in 1 to 2 page, just little blog entries at the back of these books also. So with those and some poetry, you'll get the whole gamut of everything. You get all the storytelling, and you get the real life experiences, and you get the hope that I want to give to people. So.
Absolutely, absolutely, Terence. There is so much to learn from you. There is so much to learn from your books, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you to get your books. What's the best way for them to do so?
So they're available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, from my Zulon publisher. But if you go to chroniclesoftrinian.com, which is all one word, chroniclesoftrinian.com, or you Google Terrence L. Rotering, you'll be able to find a connection to all of the books and be able to order them. And I just want to say you can get the audiobooks through Kindle. They're very cheap. So you can get this whole series of 10 books, plus the ones that are coming out now, probably for less than $30 American. So, you could listen to them and it wouldn't cost you very much. And then you get that hope and that purpose, and you get to maybe inspire your kids with some good sci-fi and fantasy, but also some spiritual aspects.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining.
Thank you, AJ. Appreciate it.